right. So, look, everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. I know we have a ton of watch parties going on. So thank you for getting together in your sales offices. We have a really good event for you today. You know, has there ever been a time when we've gotten together towards the end of the year and I've said, wow, that was such a quiet, uneventful year? If so, I can't remember it. And it certainly does not apply to this year, with the extra dose of excitement that has come with the Sitzer Burnett verdict and the fallout that's come along with it. It led to the most impactful change that has occurred in the real estate industry in the past 50 years. When the verdict was announced on October 31st of last year, it was clear that change was coming to our industry. And then in March, when NAR announced its settlement, we learned exactly what those changes would be. At that time, I shared with you two things. One, with change comes opportunity every time. And secondly, our number one, actually our only priority at the time, and still is, was to make sure that you are the best trained real estate professionals in the industry, and you are in a position to utilize this change as an opportunity to grow your business. I commend you for your professionalism and your openness to the changes that have occurred. The biggest mistake we can make is to try to hold on to the past and not embrace the future. By the number of you that have attended our training sessions, it is clear that you are doing just that, and I'm proud of all of you. I want to tell you a quick story. For my undergraduate degree, I attended Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana. They have an undergraduate business school that you apply for and start when you are a junior. This was my goal. This is where I wanted to go. In my freshman and sophomore years, I was a pretty solid B student, but it wasn't good enough because when I applied to get into the business school, I didn't get in at first. They told me in order to gain acceptance, I had to take and pass an advanced macroeconomics class over the summer. Summer in New Orleans. Awesome. Remember the heat wave that we had this summer? That was nothing to the heat in a summer in New Orleans. Anyway, I took the class and passed it and was accepted into the business school. They accepted 180 students, and I was the last one to get in. And I knew that what got me in would not work any longer. The rules were different, and the curriculum was more difficult. So I embraced my future, and I changed my study habits. I decided to become an expert in every course. I met with my professors after class. I created study groups. I studied past exams. I was determined to be better than the other 179 students in my class. I almost achieved my goal. I graduated third in my class in 1992. Similarly, the rules have changed for all of us. What worked for you in the past may not work now. The habits that got you here may not get you where you need to be in the future. These changes are an opportunity for you and all of us. Everyone knows how to operate in the old world. But if you become an expert in the new world, and we're going to help you get there, and you adjust a few of your practices to align with the new environment, you will succeed, we will succeed where others will not. And that's why we have a panel we're going to launch in about 10 minutes to talk about what some of your colleagues are doing to achieve success in this new environment. But before we get to that, I want to share with you some thoughts on the economy and the real estate market. Let's first take a look at home sales on a national basis over the past 8 years. There are two important takeaways from this chart. First, sales have averaged 5.8 million sales a year over the past 8 years. Sales peaked in 2021 and have dropped 31% since then. In fact, 2023 and 2024 will go down as the worst years as far as home sales since 1995, even worse than the years following the Great Recession of 2008. This again is another opportunity, and I'll share with you why. Before we get to that, let's examine what has caused the slowdown in sales over the past 2 years. There are, of course, lots of reasons, but I'm going to focus on some of the reasons that are about to change. Okay, first, 2020 and 2021 sort of stole buyers from 2022 and 2023 as buyers raced to take advantage of the record low rates. Second, interest rates, as we all know, moved very quickly from the 3s to the 6s and eventually to the high 7s, which moved potential home buyers to the sidelines. Third reason, the cost of all goods and services increased dramatically as inflation peaked in June of 2022 at 9.1%. And finally, let's not forget the lock-in effect with potential sellers. Sellers have been reluctant to part ways with that record low interest rate they obtained in 2020 or 2021. All of this is starting to change for the positive right now. Of course, interest rates have always been a critical driver of real estate activity, but now they are more important than ever before. And that's because of the extensive pent-up demand that exists among buyers and sellers right now. And I think that pent-up demand is about to burst. Okay, let's look at buyers first. How many buyers wanted to buy in 2020 and 2021 only to miss out in multiple offer situations? Then what happened? Rates went from the 3s to the 6s in the first half of 2022 into the high 7s by 2023. And all of those potential buyers moved to the sidelines, where most of them still remain. As rates continue to decrease, in fact, today, mortgage rates are at a 1-year low. Okay, the lowest we've seen in the past year. As rates continue to decrease, these buyers will re-engage. Okay, next, let's look at sellers. Normally, when we talk about pent-up demand, we're talking about buyers. But this time around, we have pent-up demand with potential sellers as well. Think about all those owners that refinanced during the pandemic that have been desperately holding on to that record low interest rate as long as they can. But life circumstances are happening that normally would have pushed them to move, but the financial circumstances of a low mortgage rate has superseded their desire to move. I can only imagine those kitchen table discussions. But as current rates move closer to their personal mortgage rate, life circumstances will outweigh their financial circumstances, and they will make the decision to move. Just in the past 2 years, our country has had 7 million newborn babies, 3 million marriages, 1.5 million divorces, 7 million people turned 65, 4 million deaths, 6 million new jobs, and 50 million job changes. These are all life circumstances that often come along with a move, but have not lately due to this lock-in effect. That is changing right now. We can see it with the increase in inventory in our marketplace. When you compare listing inventory to the same time last year, it's up 16%. A far cry from where we have been in the past, but we are slowly working our way to a more balanced market. Okay, let's discuss mortgage rates. But first, let's talk about what drives mortgage rates. Contrary to what some may think, it's not the Fed. It is the expectation of future inflation levels. As inflation increases, the higher the return needs to be on a fixed income security, like a mortgage, to keep up with the increasing costs of goods and services. If you have a fixed income security and inflation is expected to be high or is high, you need a higher rate of return on that fixed income security to keep up with the increasing cost of everything that's out there. And of course, as inflation recedes, so does the required rate of return on a fixed income security, again, like a mortgage. And what drives inflation? It can be a lot of things, but for the most part, it's the unemployment rate. With a lower unemployment rate, obviously more people have jobs and money to spend. And as they spend this money, the price of goods and services increases, basic supply and demand. So let's look at the unemployment rate for the past 2 years. As you can see, it has been slowly increasing from 3.5% to 4.3%. This may not sound like a lot, but that represents a 23% increase over 2 years. Now, let's look at that. Let's look at how that has impacted the inflation rate. As you can see, as unemployment has increased, the inflation rate has come down significantly over the past 2 years, from 9.2% in June of 2022 to just 2.9% this past July. This is a significant decrease in inflation. As the unemployment rate slowly increases, less people have jobs and money to spend. The economy slows, inflation decreases, and that is what drives mortgage rates down. And that is why mortgage rates have dropped and will continue to drop throughout 2025. The Fed will keep lowering rates in reaction to decreased inflation, which will only help to support and align with the decreased mortgage rates. So, I expect 2025 to be the beginning of a 3 to 4 year bull market in the real estate industry. 2025 will see an increase in units in the range of 4 to 6% over 2024. And I think we will still see a modest increase in average sale price because buyers will still outnumber sellers, and lower interest rates will provide those buyers with increased buying power. Okay, let's move to our great panel of sales professionals. Earlier, we just talked about how it is important to adjust some of our habits and business practices to align with the new rules. These sales associates have done just that and are here with us today to share their new habits and practices so that they can succeed in our new environment. So today we have with us Haven Duddy from Wayne Devon, Andrew Jacobs from Yardley Newtown, Brian Spangler from Chadds Ford, Janine Veal from Marlton Voorhees, and Amy Weltner from Millstone. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. And we're going to kick this off right away. We're going to focus our first section on buyer agency agreements. So the first question goes to Janine. Janine, please share with us what has worked for you in getting a buyer agency contract signed so early in the process.
Well, I feel like I had a little bit of an advantage here because I've actually been doing this since I started in 2003. And interestingly enough, in some of the education I've been doing all year, I learned that buyer agency started in New Jersey in 2001. So we've really been doing this in New Jersey for a long time, or at least we had it available to us when you were comfortable with that. So what I've basically done is just changed a lot of the conversation. And especially in the world that we're in today, our buyers that are coming to us for the first time, if it's not a repeat buyer, if it's not someone that you already know, and a lot of us do have that, phone call, email, text message from someone, and they just want to see the house. So that's what I hear a lot of people talking about. The buyer just wants to see the house. How do I do this before meeting the buyer for the first time? No one wants to do that. They just want to go see the house. So the idea is to schedule time with that buyer, to have them understand that it's in their best interest to take a little bit of their own time and understand the process in advance. Kind of going backwards, we always say things like, don't put the cart before the horse. whatever language comes to you naturally, because I don't believe you can script this. You can't script it. You have to educate, kind of playing off of everything that Larry said at the beginning of this call. I have pages of this because that's where I started. March 21st was the first webinar I did this year. And literally I have a list of all the webinars, classes, everything I attended just to get prepared in advance for the language that I wanted to change in those conversations with buyers to get them to schedule time with me. So if they don't already know me and we haven't worked together in the past, my goal has always been schedule a call, schedule a meeting in person if they'll do that. But if they still, are pushing back a little bit, schedule the call, schedule a Zoom or a FaceTime. Just schedule that time in advance. I haven't found anyone that doesn't think it's educational to them to schedule that time. You're being respectful of their time and schedule, as well as putting in the time you can devote to them. And then you can be prepared in advance. So this is another great tool I really want to share with everyone if they don't already know about this. You can do a buyer presentation in Moxie the same way you do a listing presentation. So you should prepare for that conversation with the buyer that you're scheduling with in the same way you would if you're taking a listing. If you list a house, you prepare, you do your research, you put a presentation together in advance of your appointment. Do the same thing with a buyer. So you're ready for them. You have a visual for them that you can send. You can go over everything while you're on the call together. It's also a way of, if they have a spouse, if they have a significant other, bring everyone together at the same time. So scheduling, I think, is the key. Then we go over everything that we're going to do from the beginning, kind of getting them to the point of the buyer agency agreement. And I will send that to them in advance as well, blank, because we want to go through that together. And I want to address any objections or concerns that they have well in advance. And they oftentimes, they need time to read that. And they don't want to feel pressured to do it in a couple minutes.
That makes a lot of sense. It takes a little extra time, but worth it in the end. Yeah. Haven, what is your experience been working with buyers recently?
So I've actually had some really great experiences since these new changes. I have signed up about 5 new buyer groups, and I do a Zoom call with all my buyers, like Janine said. And when we get to the point of talking about the changes, I basically explain to them that moving forward, ultimately the buyers are going to be responsible for paying my fee. And there are 4 ways that we can do that. I say 1, most likely sellers are going to continue to offer that fee as they had. 2, we can ask to have that fee covered as part of the contract. There's a new line item in the agreement of sale that asks the seller to pay for that. The 3rd way is that we can ask for a concession to help cover the cost of that. Or the 4th way is that they can pay for that fee as a line item on their settlement sheet. I think that for me, that it seemed to work well. It's very concise. It's very short. I kind of end it there. Everyone says, okay, they understand. And I think the only thing that I will say is that I think that it's important the way that we discuss this with our clients, and that we are calm and confident and explain to that, though, even though if a seller is not willing to pay the commission, I say that's fine. And we can negotiate that into the contract, and that, they can feel confident that no matter which way it goes, that I'm going to be able to navigate them through purchasing the house and ultimately how that fee will be paid.
That's a really good way to do it. So here are the 4 ways, and it's almost like you rank them from most likely to least likely as well. Really good way to set that up. Thanks, Haven. So let's pivot now to the new listing agreement and the rules regarding commissions paid to the buyer agent. So we're going to pivot to Amy. Amy, are you getting pushback from sellers? And if so, how are you addressing their hesitation?
Okay, so to be totally honest, I have sellers that are offering out a buyer agency commission between like 1% and 3%, and I have some that are not. To make sure that our clients are making the most informed decision And to show that we also fully understand the new laws and the new rules, we actually have a quick one-page handout that explains the 4 top highlights of the new laws. And I've given that to both buyers and sellers, but we particularly bring that along to a listing appointment with the exclusive buyer agency agreement. That way a seller can see exactly what decisions the buyer's making when they commit to working with an agent, and being able to show the seller that the buyer has the right to choose whether they see any home that does not offer buyer agency commission has been a true eye opener for most sellers. They understand that to sell their home, they want the best price and the best terms. They need to get their house out to the most, the highest number of potential buyers. So seeing that the buyer has that option to not come see their home if they're not offering has really been great. The pushback that we have mainly seen has been from those sellers that are also buyers. And they feel that if they have to commit to paying their buyer agent, then their buyer should commit to paying their agent. However, we've also seen that when you show homes before their home is listed, they realize that other sellers are offering out a commission. They need to be, offering the same types of things, and they might not have to pay that entire commission. So then they're more open to offering out a buyer agent commission on their home.
That's a great idea, showing them the buyer agency agreement, and that the buyer has the option to only see homes where a seller is offering a cooperative commission. That's a really that's a great idea. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
For that share. We're going to pivot to Andrew. Andrew, how are things going with you? How are you working with sellers?
Hey, Larry, thanks for including me. Really honored to be part of this. So like
welcome.
Janine said, on the buyer side, educate. So first and foremost, I think nobody understands this thing. So when I sit with a seller, start with explaining what the problems were in our industry. One being when commissions were displayed in the MLS, theoretically, buyers agents could sort those listings and show their buyers certain properties. And that's really not a great practice. And then that was leading to sellers potentially having to keep their commission offered out higher to make sure their property was shown. So when you flip this thing to a positive for consumers, you can really explain that the new set of rules is more protective for buyers and for sellers, because sellers can negotiate what they want to do more freely, and buyers won't be just showed certain properties. They'll be showed all properties. So I view it as a good thing. And I think if you explain that to sellers, you can get pretty far. Then the question becomes, well, why would you offer out a commission? And I don't even want to talk about getting ours as the listing agent, because I think if you're a good listing agent and have a good presentation, you should be able to get 3%, 2.5, 2.75, something like that. But why would you offer out? So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, number one, you don't want to saddle the buyer with the cost of figuring out how to pay their agent. And 95% of buyers use a buyer's agent. So they're going to have a buyer agency agreement by law with their agent. So if they have to get a down payment, closing costs, and now figure out how to pay their agent, they may not be able to afford your house out of pocket. So offering out takes that cost off of the buyer. Number two is I explain that all the data we just reviewed on all the sales in your neighborhood and all of my analysis is based on listings that we're offering out a co-op. This new idea hasn't happened yet. So I don't have any data on that, and I don't know that you should be the guinea pig to try and offer out zero. I don't know how that will go, and no realtor can tell you how that will go. The third thing is you may not have to pay out what you're offering. So if we offer out 3%, well, some buyers may have signed with their agent for 2% or 2.5%, and that agent can only accept a commission of that amount. And possibly the offer comes in asking for 2%, and now you're not paying the 3%. So it really is just an offer, whereas before there was a blanket offer of compensation and every agent got 3% or 2.5%. So that's a big change. And then the last thing I would say here of why you should offer out is that my results, on average, in the last couple of years, have gotten sellers 7% above asking price. My results are based on this strategy of offering out a healthy commission. And so now if I'm up against another agent, I just want to quickly say, and I'll end here. If I'm up against another agent, and let's say they come in and they say, hey, you don't have to offer out, you could offer out 1 or 2%. Okay, so let's say the net for working with me on the way I recommend, let's say you'll net 93% of the sale, 94% of the sale. And let's say that agent's telling you they can get you 95% of the sale with some lower fees. But if I'm 7% above on average, then I'm going to get you 100%, 107% of the price. And then 93% of that gets us to 100%. Whereas that agent, maybe ask them for their results like I've showed you today. Maybe that agent's only getting 98% of the price or 100% of the price, and they're getting you 95%, right? And so really, I'm going to make you 3, 4, 5% on the house working with me in this strategy, versus losing with that agent because they didn't get you the best price, even though they charged 1% less or 2% less. So, so these are some of the talking points I give to sellers. And honestly, I would do it myself. And I tell them, when I sold my own house, I offered out 3%. That's money where my mouth is.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really good point. I mean, it's all about the net. It's all about the net in the end, right? And that's what's going to be most important to the seller. And I really like how you preface everything with, let's back up a minute. Let's talk about how we got here. And these new rules are here to protect you. That's a good way to approach it. Thanks, Andrew. So next, last but not least, in the first round of questions, we're moving to Brian. Brian, where have you had the most success working with buyers or sellers? And what's been the most difficult for you? And I'll add to it, so where have you had the most success, buyers and sellers, and what's been most difficult for you?
Thanks, Larry. Honestly, it's been pretty equal. I kind of do what Janine was talking about, where I think it's very important to have a sit-down buyer consultation in person whenever possible. And also in the listing presentation, I kind of do the exact same thing with both buyers and sellers, is I will kind of counteract the objection right away and explain the settlement before they even ask. So I really haven't had to deal too much with it. Most people that know me know I'm very heavy into the Buffini coaching. So most of my business is from referral. I can see where most challenges would be from colder leads. But I haven't really had too much pushback from buyers or sellers getting 3% on both sides. They mostly understand kind of where that money is going, kind of the service that I bring to them by being able to sit down and explain my value to them. I really haven't had too many challenges. I'm one of the few that really like this settlement. I think it's made it a lot easier.
So I want to follow up on that a little bit. Why has it made things easier?
I think it's much easier to negotiate your value when you're coming from what you do as a service versus, like what Andrew was saying, versus just paying out a buyer's agent. So I think, explaining what the buyer's agent does and the value that they're bringing to, I haven't had really much pushback on my sellers from offering a buyer's agent commission. But as a sole listing agent perspective, I think it's much easier to say, hey, this is my percentage. This is my fee to, for me to represent you. Let's talk about what you want to pay a buyer's agent now. So you kind of cross that box off early as you're going through the listing contract. I'm writing 3% in right in front of them. And then we get to line B, where we put in the buyer's commission. Now let's have that conversation. So I think it's made it a lot easier in that sense by doing the buyer's agent or the buyer's representation meeting. It's by sitting down in front of them. I think it's much easier to explain my value as well, what I'm going to do throughout the process. I think storytelling is huge. And getting that 3% every time, I think is pretty easy when you explain what you're actually going to do for them. But I think it gets everything out in the open right away.
Yeah, Brian, you have no idea how much I appreciate you saying you like how the new listing agreement is set up, because it took us about 6 months to land on the way that is set up. And I can't tell you, this is like version 27, and version 26 was released to everybody. And then we changed it based on feedback we got from our sales associates about some things. So I'm really happy to hear that it's working. I know in New Jersey, I believe that listing agreement from the state is being used, and we are in the process of working on an internal listing agreement for New Jersey. I'm not sure where that is in the process right now. If one of my regionals could text me from New Jersey and let me know where we are with that. but that listing agreement, I think, landed in a nice place. I think that the sort of bifurcation of what a seller's paying, the listing agent and the buyer agent, is where this thing is headed, and I'm glad that we ended up that way. And someone asked if this is being recorded. Yes, it is being recording. It is being recorded, and we'll be putting it on the company Facebook page at some point. I'm sure in the next day or so. So that's where it'll be. Okay, thank you, Brian. Haven, we're going to pivot back to you. Haven, what do you see as some of the benefits of these changes?
I think one of the benefits of the changes is allowing people to, have a little bit more transparency in the fees that are being paid. I think when a seller is offering a buyer agent fee, that now a buyer will, recognize that, and the seller in theory will get, credit for the fact that they are kind of in advance saying that they're going to cover that fee. And I explained to my clients that if they don't, then that fee can be negotiated into the contract, and they're going to factor that in when they consider what they ultimately want to pay for the home. So I think it just makes it a little bit more transparent for everyone.
Thank you. That's it aligns with what everyone's really saying. So Amy, you have an interesting perspective on how buyer agents should work with listing agents. Can you please share?
Sure. So I'm an agent that works with both buyers and sellers. And I don't know about anybody else, but I have noticed some dissension between agents when that question comes up, is your seller offering a commission? And I felt it back when I got the question to myself. So I truly believe that it's in a seller's best interest to offer out a cooperative compensation. And I do sometimes feel that personal, that I didn't do my job well enough if they choose not to. So when that call comes in and asks me about compensation and I have to say no, unfortunately, I do feel that, are they judging me kind of pang. But I've also, on the converse side, have agents come off harshly and offended when I ask the question to them. So my feeling is, as we move through this, like, we have to look at this more productively. Like, we're all new to this. And I started asking listing agents the same question, but focusing on how I can educate my buyer. So the way I've been texting or calling is saying, just to clarify for my client, is the seller covering the buyer agency commission, or should we plan for a different arrangement? Because I feel like we're too focusing on changing our language to buyers and sellers, but we also have to focus on how we speak to our fellow agents. Because really, we're on the same side, right? Like, we all want to find a great home, we want to get them a great deal, but we also have to work together to make sure it's smooth and efficient in the end. So I just feel like we really just need to focus on how we talk to each other just as much.
Okay, so along that line, I'm going to throw in a question that was not part of the original script. Sorry. So, and this is open to anybody. What we were concerned about as a leadership team was, we can train all of you, our regionals can train all of you, our sales leaders can train our own sales associates, and we've worked obviously very hard on that. We've had endless amounts of training sessions that are still going on. I guess my question is, are you finding it difficult dealing with agents at other companies that maybe don't understand the new environment? And how are you handling that?
So for me, I am noticing that people will just write, like, the responses are strange. Like, sometimes it'll be, depends on the offer. No, it doesn't depend on the offer. It's a yes or a no. It really is a yes or no question. They signed the listing agreement saying yes, they would offer compensation, or they signed it saying no, they won't. Right. So I am finding that sometimes it is more difficult dealing with people from other agencies.
Andrew, same question. Thank you, Amy.
Sure. Yeah, it's been a challenge. I actually, a couple people commented here on something I had said, that if you're offering out, for example, 3%, if the buyer's agent can only take 2% because that's what they signed up for, wouldn't the buyer get the other 1%? And the answer is no. Everything's negotiable. And I've had 4 or 5 listings since the NAR settlement, and I got offers of all types. So if even if we were offering out 3%, the agent asked for 2 or 2.5 to cover theirs, and that was the end of it. And the buyer wanted to win the house, so they didn't ask for a 0.5% in concession. So So I think we need to be clear, and agents all over the industry need to learn that everything's negotiable, everything's variable. And if you've had listings since, and many of you had since the NAR settlement, you'll see that offers are coming in of all types. And I think we all just need to realize that there's no governing body of like an MLS anymore. And I think, interestingly, California, I believe, put out their state listing agreement that has no place for a buyer broker fee. They don't want sellers offering out buyer broker fees. And basically, I read the statement, and the mindset seems to be by the California Association of Realtors, hey, we'll put listings up and offers come in, and we'll just see what they look like. This agent might be asking for 2.5. This agent might be asking for 3. This agent's asking for nothing because their buyer's going to pay them. So, that really is the world we're in. And so I think, yeah, there is a lot of confusion, to answer your question, Larry, and other companies are training differently. But at the end of the day, it's all negotiable. And that's what got us in this mess in the first place, is that we weren't talking that way. It is all negotiable. And even when you're with your seller saying you should offer out 2.5 or 3%, they may not end up paying that. We have to see what the offers do, but get everybody in the door. That's my thing. Get everybody in the door.
David Rickle, thank you very much for getting back to me. So we are using the standard company listing contract in New Jersey, and I'm told it's been very well received, which is a relief. As I said, we worked on it forever. And for buyer agency, we're using the state form, but we are in the process of building our own simpler contract for our New Jersey sales professionals. Okay, thank you, David. So Janine, going back to you, I understand that you are excited about the economic forecast and lower interest rates. Will you talk a little bit about that, please?
I am. So most of my excitement kind of ties into the beginning of your presentation. So about 2 weeks ago, I watched the live webinar that Lawrence Yoon gave from NAR's chief economist, and his slideshow and it was only a 30-minute presentation, but basically touched on everything that you said. Life-changing events is, in quotes, one of the topics that he really said is going to change as we go forward in our business. The changes that we're going to see are based on the list of divorces, babies, job changes, estates. And, before I watched his webinar, I found that that's where our business was going. I'm seeing probably 9 out of 10 of my clients personally are an estate, a death in the family, a divorce. There's some major life change shift. But some of the other comments that he made are delayed sellers cannot wait any longer.
Yep.
And I really like that. I really think that that's going to change. It's going to bring about the movement that we need for our clients that have been still sitting on the sidelines, that want to buy and sell, because we still have those clients that they need to sell to buy, and to be contingent has just never worked for them. And, we've come up with all kinds of strategies for them, but some of them are willing to take the risk, and a lot of them are still not willing to take that risk yet. So they're kind of the ones waiting on the sidelines. And I think the lower rates, even just a little bit lower, they're moving and they're going to start ticking down, inch by inch. I think that's going to kind of bring them along to have the conversation with us again and consider the ability to sell and buy. And the inventory rising is going to be another one that I'm excited about, because I've seen it myself even before we started talking about it in the last couple of weeks. I just watch my one area every single day. The average in Marlton listings were about 36 or 38 a day at coming soon and active, until maybe about a month ago. And now they're touching on like 58 on average a day.
Wow.
It's a big difference.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah. So I kind of watch that every day, and that's telling me that there's a lot of change going on. But I also, this is off topic, but I want to touch on what everybody else just said a few minutes ago. Sorry,
Sure.
Larry.
No, go ahead.
Comments that we all have from the beginning of all of this was, what's the commission going to be? How am I going to know what the commission is going to be? And I think in the beginning of the changes, that's where everybody struggled. How am I going to know what the commission is? And the conversation that we've had in our office is, you have to get to the point where that's not even in your head. You have to just put that out of your head. If you're representing the buyer, you have a buyer agency agreement. You know what you're going to be paid. Your goal and this is the conversation I have with my buyers when we sign that agreement, your goal is going to be to start off with to get that seller to pay as much of that compensation as you possibly can. You're putting that in your offer. Now, I've also been watching the participants. There's little, comments from everybody watching today. Yes. And I see them saying things like, isn't that going to hurt your buyer if you're in a multiple bid situation? Well, that's again back to where we're negotiating for that buyer. So you're sitting down, it's communication with that buyer. What is in their best interest and what do they want to do? I have one buyer who has said to me, I'm going to pay you your 3%, even if we go buy a for sale by owner. I'm going to pay you your 3% and not ask the seller for it if we find something off market. If we run into those, some buyers can afford to do that. I guess not all can, but it's part of our negotiation. And for those of us that were negotiating 10, 15 years ago for concessions for a buyer for closing costs, we go back to that. That's basically where we are. And as the inventory grows, like we're seeing and discussing now, we're going to have better advantages to get those concessions for our buyers, even if it's not the full fee, at least so we can negotiate part of that fee on their behalf.
Yeah, I think you make some really good points. Back to the economic forecast. The other thing, even though, as I mentioned in my opening, the Fed doesn't drive mortgage rates, the Fed's going to lower rates in September, and probably a couple of more times before the end of the year. It's going to be 25 or 50 basis points in September. It's in a week, I believe, week or 2 weeks. That is going to be big news. I think that the consumer is going to hear that. They're going to say, "Oh, the Fed lowered rates." Then they're going to check to see where mortgage rates are. They're going to see that rates are in the low sixes. They may think the Fed's lowering of rates got them there. It doesn't matter. But I think that is going to create, a situation where sellers and buyers will pick up their heads and be like, "Oh, maybe now's the time." So I think when the Fed lowers rates, that's going to be a big moment because that's going to be big news. Okay, a couple more questions. Andrew, you think it is important to address the elephant in the room. It seems not a lot of people are happy with the terms of the NAR settlement. What are your thoughts about finding the silver lining in this situation? I think we've covered some of this, but I'd like to hear it again from you, Andrew.
Yeah, sure. I feel like I'm going to be overly optimistic here. I mean, but you know what? I think to survive here and thrive as agents, you have to buy in. I mean, what else are we going to do? We're just going to complain all day. You can't do that. I have not met one realtor, not one, that is thrilled about the new way of doing things, except maybe Brian. He was saying that before. So Brian, you're the first one. But you know what? The fact is, like, I just trained my brain to think of it this way. What if the alternative was worse? What if rules had been imposed on our industry, which has been talked about, where a seller is not allowed to pay a buyer's agent? That was definitely talked about, and who knows if that's in the future, but that is a possibility, or was a real possibility. So I feel like the attorneys at NAR or whatever, they're smart people. They have to be. And I figured they saw the writing on the wall. They got ahead of this and they wrote this NAR settlement to try to basically save the commission structure as we know it. And so far, I don't think it's World War III. I think we're all figuring this out somehow. So I think maybe NAR, maybe we view it that way so that we're not sitting around angry all the time. Maybe we view NAR as having saved the structure of commissions and saved the ability for the seller to pay the buyer's agent. So I really like thinking of it that way. And maybe this had to happen in order to save it, because if the writing was on the wall and rules were going to be imposed, antitrust, sellers can't pay a buyer's agent, it's against their best interest, then that could have been worse. So the alternative could have been worse. And so I try to think of it that way. Another thing is that they may have protected consumers by this as well, because if that rule had come into place where a seller can't pay a buyer's agent, well, we know that's not the best way to do real estate. And so now buyers would have actually been saddled with the cost of figuring out how to pay their agent. Instead of now, we're finding a way for sellers to still pay most or all of it. So maybe they protected the consumers, they protected our industry, the way we work. So, I mean, again, maybe everyone's going to say I'm overly optimistic or I'm being too glee about it, but I think at the end of the day, that's how I'm viewing it. And the last thing I would say here is I've made a little bit more commission on some deals because of this. So in New Jersey, especially Central Jersey, North Jersey, 1.5%, 2%. It's been that way for years. Anyone that works there knows that. We've been very spoiled in Bucks County here with 2.5%, 3% all over the place. That has not been the case in Central Jersey or North Jersey. So 1.5%, 2%. But I'm signing my buyers up for 2.5% or 3%. And it's becoming a little bit of a new normal that they're kicking in the rest at closing, or I'm negotiating that. And so I have not just eaten the 2%. In a few of my recent deals, I've gotten my 2.5%. And the buyer, if they loved my work or whatever the case, they're happy to give a 0.5%. You know, it depends the price of the house. There's a lot of factors. But last thing is I spoke to an agent in North Carolina on this conference call thing I do every month. And she said, guys, she's laughing at the country. We've been doing this for years in North Carolina. It's been 1% in North Carolina for years from sellers. And we've been signing buyer agency agreements. And at every closing she's done for years, the buyer kicks in something. So this is not new to her. And so it just might be a new normal. And I've gotten paid a little bit more on my New Jersey deals because of this. So let's just try to think positively. But I'm not, again, I'm not being ignorant. I know what's going on. But man, if you spin it that way, you have a much better day. So there you go.
Andrew, I too am a glass half full kind of guy. I'm an eternal optimist, and I agree with you. Like I said earlier, with change comes opportunity. I actually think that as the market becomes more balanced and then ultimately moves to a buyer's market, I believe that gross commission income percentage could go up actually. So we'll just time will tell. All right, so we're tight on time. So I would like a takeaway. We're going to start with Brian. Based on everything we've heard today, in 15 seconds or less, what is your biggest takeaway, Brian?
I think it just confirms that the agents that are able to adapt and change their mindset into, like Andrew just said, not fully buying in maybe, but appreciating what is changing and learning how to negotiate I think it is a really good change.
Improvise, adapt, and overcome. Andrew, 15 seconds or less.
Good. I got a little spark in the chat room here, everyone being happy and optimistic. But I think we need to talk to consumers and explain that this is a good thing for consumers. If you really think about it, buyers agents are not going to be sorting listings anymore, and sellers are not going to be forced to pay a high commission just to keep up. So, I mean, I think you have to explain to consumers that it's ultimately a good thing. So that's how I'm operating, and so far, so good.
Thank you. Janine?
Same. I love the fact that we get to educate our clients in advance and they're prepared and they're actually taking it seriously and they want to do that. They don't just want to run out to see the house. And I think one other thing is negotiation. Just listen, educate yourself, and be prepared.
Awesome. Thank you, Janine. Haven?
I think it just gives us an opportunity to explain this to our clients, and that if we can feel confident and show them that regardless, we're going to be able to help them through, and that ultimately it's really not going to change things. I think that is going to ultimately have the biggest impact is how we are, explaining this and dealing with this to the consumers.
Awesome. Thank you, Haven. And finally, Amy.
I think the best part about it is that we can truly communicate our value and show on both sides, the seller side and the buyer side, what our value is. We're educated. We have a great company behind us that's giving us even more education every day. And that to me is awesome.
That's great. Thank you. So I think that the message here is, these changes are an opportunity for all of us. Like we've talked about, everyone knew how to do it, before this settlement, but let's as a company become the experts in the new environment. And we can use these changes as an opportunity to further separate ourselves from the competition. Thank you to our panelists for being here today, for taking the time. Thank you for everybody that helped on putting this together. Thank you for everybody that joined in the watch parties. And I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.